All right, everyone. Well, welcome to the inaugural Interforest Working Group webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. So my name is Edie Juno, and I'm a researcher with the World Resources Institute. And I'm also joined here today by Sabin Ray, my colleague from WRI, and by Dave Nowak with the USDA Forest Service, and Scott Maco of Davey Tree Expert Company. So we are with World Resources Institute, a global research organization that spans more than 60 countries with international offices in Brazil, China, Indonesia, India, Mexico, the US, and beyond. And we are Cities for Forests. Cities for Forests connects cities around the world with their inner forests, including their city trees and urban parks, with their nearby forests, including green corridors and watersheds, and with their faraway forests, such as tropical and boreal forests. And we encourage our cities to conserve, manage, and restore these forests. And to do so, we provide technical assistance to align local policy, share knowledge between peers, and help with communication activities. And today on the line, we've got guests from a few different WRI offices and Cities for Forest partner cities. So we're very excited to have everyone here today. Cities for Forests is a group of pilot projects, Revolve, and World Resources Institute, and we are supported by NICFI and FEMSA. And so the Interforest Working Group is intended to be a collection of webinars, trainings, and facilitated conversations, all pertaining to these inner forests. So we'll be covering tools, questions about equity and access, discussing different successes and failures, and new research. The inner and experiences from the different cities that can be useful as this plan. And so that's kind of what we're focusing on today. We'll be talking about providing tools and strategies that can help to create, to maintain, or to expand the urban forest. And specifically today, we're going to be talking about understanding the inner forest. This is all part of the tools database that will be available in the near future. And that's going to be a resource for officials from our founding cities to engage with their inner forests and their nearby and faraway forests. And so tools will focus on a variety of topics. Again, today we'll be talking about understanding forests, but there's also ways to encourage resident engagement or thinking about financing and procurement or specific themes. So stay tuned for that. We're very excited about this new tools database that's coming up. So today we are going to be talking with experts from the iTree tools suite, and iTree So we're so excited today to have two experts on the line. Our presenters are Dave Nowak, and he is a senior scientist with the USDA Forest Service and a team leader for iTree. And Dave is an absolute expert in this field and going to be able to tell us a lot about iTree. And we also have Scott Maco, Director of Research and Development with Davey Tree Expert Company, and he's been doing a lot of work on developing iTree tools and has a lot of great information to share with you as well. And so I'm going to let Dave take over on sharing the screen, and without further ado, we'll get started. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Edie. As you were saying, iTree's been out since 1996, but Scott and I have been working on it. There were precursor models to iTree prior to that. And I'm trying to get my slides up here. Can you see them?
Yeah, looks good.
All right, we're good. So Scott and I will be chiming in. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. But iTree development started in the original precursors, probably late 80s, early 90s, but evolved into this system of tools that we put together in 2006. So Scott's with Davey Tree. I'm with the U.S. Forest Service. We're two of the main partners on this. There's many other partners, as you'll see, in trying to disseminate these tools to help communities assess their own forests and understand the services and values provided by the forest, hopefully to improve management So what iTree basically is what I just said. It's a series of free tools funded by the U.S. Forest Service and Davey, are the two main funders of this. But you can see on the bottom all the partners that we have involved with development and sharing this information, these tools that we're going to talk about today. We're going to run through some of the tools, not all of them. If you want to see some, just chime in. We're focused mainly on Eco, Canopy, and Design, I think, and maybe MyTree. Again, ask any questions you want. Most of the tools are web-based. A couple of them we have to show on slides. Eco, which is the core tool, and Hydro are not web-based. They run on your PC. So the premise behind the model is this. Wherever you live in the world, there's a structure to your forest. You may have no trees. You may have 1 million trees. They may be oak trees. They may be palm trees. And the size and the distribution of those trees affect the functions of the forest. And the functions are the benefits that are received, whether it's cooler air temperatures, air pollution removal, cleaner water, wildlife, whatever it might be. And those functions have value. And that's what this model is about, is we're trying to help people, number one, measure the structure. So you tell us what you have, whether you're dealing with a small park, a backyard, an inventory, a whole region. We've done whole states in the United States. We'll help you assess that structure, and from that, basically the model brings in the local weather data, information about your area, pollution data, and simulates the trees over a course of time, usually a year, sometimes longer, and then estimates the values provided by that. So that's the main premise of the model. The core tool we're going to talk about is Eco. If you want to run this anywhere, we have national versions, but Eco is the first tool we have to build because all the other tools pretty much ripple off of Eco. From all our tools, this is our distribution as of late last year. We have over 30,000 users across the world, mainly using Eco, Canopy, somewhat Design. Some tools will work globally. Eco is one that can work globally. Some tools have to be fit to work globally, and we'll explain that to you. So we have a lot of users across the world. And this is our usership since we released iTree in 2006. Again, iTree was a conglomeration of older models that we brought together into this packaging system. There's tech support, there's manuals, all sorts of things to help you to use these tools. So the concept here is if you're going to assess structure, there are two main methods which you can do it. You can do it top-down using remote sensing and aerial photographs. So we have some tools that will do that. Or you do it bottom-up, which is you go in the field and measure some trees. We have to have, for the model to function, we have to know something about your area. So we're either going to help you do photo interpretation and assess cover, or we're going to help you go in the field and measure some of the trees. It takes more work to go in the field, but much better data when you go in the field because there's a lot of things you can't get from aerial photographs often, such as tree health, tree sizes, tree species, things like that it's better to go in the field for. So you measure structure. In the yellow here are the services that are provided by iTree. In the green on the bottom, cooler air temperatures, comfort, pollen, and products are things they're working on right now. So we're trying to basically give you one-stop shopping, if you will, when you measure a tree to understand all the benefits and costs associated with that so you can make intelligent decisions on management by understanding what your forest does and what your forest is, what it does, and what it's worth. In the end, what's important is what do you do with the data? These are some ideas that people have come up with. The billboard campaign in Milwaukee, tree tags in Minnesota on the upper left, Oakville on the lower right did a solution to our pollution reports. So I always throw this slide in here because there's some really innovative things that people have done with some of the data they received, and that's the hope we will hope you will do. If you use the tools, we hope you will use the data to do something with it and make a difference. If you're not going to, don't bother wasting your time collecting the data if you're not going to use it. But if you do use it, try to be innovative and make some difference with it. And some communities have made some really cool advances. So let's get to the tools. In the blue are our core tools. That's what we're going to talk about today. Eco is the core tool. I'll start with that one. Canopy is a photo interpretation tool. Design is a tool on Google where you can sketch up houses and put trees around buildings. Landscape only works in the U.S. We won't probably talk about that today. That's bringing all sorts of mapping data together of tree cover and ecosystem services and threats to people and threats to forest to understand in the scale what are the problems within our country across the landscape so we can do better management. But probably one of the most important things you're going to see here, if you can see my cursor, is database for international. We'll show you ECO will work in about 5 countries or continents. But if you're not in an area that's already been built, you can use database here, this tool called database, that will help you import data we need so you can run ECO. So this model will work globally. Canopy will work globally. Design only works in the US and Canada right now. But if we build a national version for ECO, we can build a design program for you. And then MyTree is a phone app. So we're probably going to focus more on these 3 tools here and then MyTree. And if you want to see, we can talk about Hydro too. Hydro is a specialized tool that simulates the effects of tree cover and impervious cover in your area on water flows and water quality, which is an important issue, but it's more a high-end tool. But it is available. Scott, you want to chime in anything there? Or?
Yeah, I think the point is, I think everybody probably on the line has some idea of what iTree is in terms of a platform of models that help you assess your tree resource or your forests. And what, these tools do work. Dave showed the global map of who's using iTree. We have people from 136 different countries using iTree now, over 320,000 users worldwide. And largely, over the past 10 years, since about 2006, that's largely been U.S.-based users of iTree. But in recent years, our international contingent of usership has really increased and is accelerating because of the availability of these tools and our work in extending them to other countries. So as Dave mentioned, I'm not sure where everybody's from on the line here today, but iTree is available off the shelf, just like users would use it in the U.S., in 38 different European countries, Australia, Canada, and so you can use iTree, and that's what we hope you'll get out of this, is that while there are some caveats about using iTree internationally, these tools can be used, and especially this core tool, iTree Eco, which Dave has referred to and is now jumping into. So don't be, I guess my point is that don't be reticent about looking at these tools and seeing what's available, because they can be used for you, and they're not just for people in the U.S., Canada, Mexico, or where we've opened up iTree, but there is a way. You may have a few more hoops to jump through, but these tools can be used, they're being used, and as Dave said, they're being used in really innovative ways. And whether you want to, demonstrate the value of a single tree in the front of the Capitol building of your country or the entire forest that represents your city, you can do that with iTree Eco. So with that being said, Dave, I'll let you continue on.
All right, thanks, Scott. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask, but we spent a lot of time on the iTree team trying to make these tools easy for you so you can do the job. So a lot of our work, half is doing the science and half is trying to make these little platforms and apps and things that'll make it as easy for you as possible. And in doing so, it makes it easier for us to do the work too, when we go in the field anyways. So Eco is the core tool. And basically, I'm going to walk you through it. There's like 7 steps. It's pretty simple. But basically, you're going to measure some structure about your area, whether it's a tree or a group of trees, an inventory, or we have a statistical sampling program where we'll tell you where to go to measure the trees. And once you do that and put it into the system, it'll tell you all about your forest, how many trees you have, the species composition, the species diversity. It'll do some of the ecosystem services, energy conservation, pollution removal. You can read those on there. And we also, at least in the United States, we tie it to pest risk, how much of the forest is, let's say, at risk to emerald ash borer and things like this. And it ascribes a value to it. So we're trying to give you as much information as we can so you can make intelligent decisions about what you should do today to make a better forest in the future, or what your forest is worth today. and where is it located. Just basic information. I mean, the way I always say it, if you're going to manage a grocery store, it's really hard to manage a grocery store if you don't know what's on the shelves. So if you're going to manage your urban system, it's really hard to manage the vegetation if you don't know what you have or even a starting point. And this is to get you information on a starting point to what you have and what is its value, and then you can make intelligent decisions moving forward. iTree is a relatively new feature too, where you can, once you have the data in, you can forecast future populations and grow the forest and kill the forest off, add insect disease attacks or storm events, and you can sort of see what happens to your services through time based on running various scenarios, and that's already in the tool itself. As Scott was saying, we have current versions right now, so if you're in Australia, Canada, Mexico, Europe, or the United States, this is all set to go. We are working on versions for Colombia, New Zealand, and South Korea right now. So if you're in the green areas on the lower map, you're set to go with ECO. If you're in the yellows, you should be set. Colombia should be released in the next month or so. We're working with the Koreans right now and New Zealanders for versions. If not, and if you want to develop a national version, contact us. Basically, once a national version is available, every city in the country just can load right away and go to it. If you're not in the green or yellow areas on the map, you can use a cool tool called a database, which I'll show you next. This is just a graphic of eco projects that have been submitted through our server as of last month. So you can see we have, as Scott was saying, a lot of international projects are being run, and they're not all in Europe or in the countries that we have. You can still run your community through the eco process. These are the City for Forest cities on the list that I was sent that have already run iTree eco projects. Obviously, most of them are in the United States because we've done a lot of the work here ourselves with the Forest Service. But we do have one in Mexico and one in Canada. They've already put plots in the city, and we have estimates for these cities. But then again, if you're in any of those green areas on that map, you're ready to go and run eco if you want. If you're not in those areas, you have to use a tool called iTree Database. And there's two parts to the database program. So let's say you're in Beijing, China. So we would need you to fill out a form for Beijing, and there's a series of questions. We've already put this thing for you. You just go online and answer these questions. What continent are you in? What country is it? If you have states, what state within the country or province, whatever it is, within China in that case. And it's basic questions about latitude and longitude of your city, your elevation, certain things that we don't know about the city that the model needs to run. And it's pretty straightforward. And once you submit that to us, let's say you did Beijing and you submitted it to us, it'll come to us, we'll check over the data, and the next version release, which we release every 3 to 6 months, Beijing will then be live to run an eco. So instead of running the whole country of China, you can build China up by doing city by city or any country that way. It's a little less efficient, but it allows you anywhere in the world to run a city. The other thing in database is if you encounter a species, we have 8,000 species in our database. If you encounter a species that's not in our database, in iTree Database, and I'm saying database a lot here, in iTree Database there's a species program also where you can enter a species that's not in our database. Once it comes to us, we will enter it to the program, then that species does not need to be entered again. Occasionally, particularly in tropical regions, people will find trees that are not in our database, and through this iTree Database program, you can enter those species in also. So basically there's two programs, one for your location if you're entering a city, where you can send us data, and one of the things we like to get is your pollution data. There's a way to submit that through the database program. And the other is, besides location, is the species the species information. Assuming we have that, or you're in a city or a country that's already been submitted, here's what you have to do to run iTree Eco. Step one is determine your study area. The program will work for any geography. It can work from one tree up to, in theory, could do, well, I couldn't do the whole world yet because I don't have all the data in, but it could do all of Europe if it wanted to, or all the United States. You can pick your geography. That's one of the hardest questions people want to understand. But basically, you can do a city, you can do a park, you can do whatever you want, but you have to delimit some sort of area that the program knows to work within. Now, let's stick with the case that I just made up, Beijing. So let's say we pick the city of Beijing. Step two, then, is saying, what do you want to do in Beijing? Do you want to inventory the trees or do a sample? Now, to inventory every tree in Beijing would be insane. So you wouldn't do that. You would go to a sampling program on the right-hand side where we statistically estimate the population total of Beijing. However, if you're in, let's say, Tiananmen Square or part of Beijing, you only carry about a small area, it might be more efficient and more accurate if you counted every tree, or if you're going to do tree management on it. In that case, we would do an inventory. The difference between the two is if you do an inventory, you're counting every tree. So if you put 1,000 trees in, the answer from iTree will be 1,000. If you're doing sampling, we will send you, the program will tell you where to go. You will put down a circle and measure every tree within that circle, and we will statistically estimate the population total. So in that case, with a sample, you may measure only 1,000 trees in the sample, but the statistical estimate may say there's 1 million or more trees within the city. It's using the sample to estimate the population total. So now you've made your decision. Let's say we're going to sample Beijing. You go into the program after you install it on your computer. Again, it's free. And just set the project up, which basically says, where are you? And what this screen shows is what data do you want to collect. There are core variables that we need. You have to measure diameter, and you have to measure species. But there are optional variables that you can read through online. There are many optional variables. We recommend collecting species and diameter, information about the crown, information about tree health, whether it's dead or alive, and information if it's near a building to do energy conservation. But it's up to you. You can pick what you want to collect. If you don't collect distance and direction to your building, the energy model will not run. So certain pieces will drop out if you don't collect them. But the core information is basically species and diameter. Once you set up your project, and in this case you go to, it'll lay the plots for you. In this example, it's Philadelphia, so we would say we want to lay down whatever number we want in Beijing. You basically pick the number of plots you want to lay down, and the program will drop them, automatically pick the locations for you. In the program, you can see in the upper left by the yellow arrow, there's a KML. You can export those points to Google Earth, and then it'll give you the points for all the places you need to go to. And at those points, as you can see in the lower left there, number 36 there, that would be a plot center. And everything, in our case, we measure 10th acre plots, which is 37.2 foot radius. Everything within 37.2 feet around that point on the map would be measured in terms of trees and other surfaces. So basically, you go to those points, and we make it very easy. You can go put them on your phone on Google, but you have to lay it. So you determine how many plots you want to lay. It lays the points for you. Once you have them on Google, you can train the crews and go collect the data, whether it's an inventory of those plots. You just go to those locations. This picture here is of Mickey Merritt in Houston. Wherever the plot falls, you go to. And this is in a bayou in Houston. The plot center fell in the middle of a bayou swamp. It's him marking plot center. Plots with no trees are just as important as plots with trees. You don't, wherever the random plots fall, that's where you go to. We have a mobile data collector. You can use paper if you like, or you can use the mobile data collector, and you collect the data right on your phone. So as soon as you're done, you can submit them to the server, and the program's ready to analyze the data. This is the web form as it looks like on the web page. The lower part is the web form, and the upper part is the mobile form. The exact same thing. One's on your, if you collect it on paper, you go to your PC to enter it, or if you collect it on your phone, they're both the same form. You can do it right on your phone and enter the data directly. New feature we just added this past year, you can post GPS points. So if you're doing an inventory and want to put them on a map, you can collect the GPS coordinates of all the trees and then load them to a map and have a street tree inventory, if you will, with the data from iTree and the GPS coordinates. Once you're done collecting the data, you submit the data. You usually get the data back within an hour, depending on how many people are in front of you in the server. It'll give you an email. You load that in, and you basically have all the data you want to have. What I have highlighted here are various charts and tables. There's an automatic report generator that you can edit and export. All sorts of data on there. Everything that we thought you would need, you can analyze from that. So it's basically a data dictionary of all the information that you put in. In this case, you can see avoided runoff, net carbon sequestration, carbon storage, oxygen production. There's another chart on number of trees and sizes of the trees. You can actually see the actual data that you put in that was run, the hourly weather data, the hourly pollution data that was used to process the data. So this is a data library of all sorts of information about your forest. So Scott, I'll end there to see if there's any questions on eco, but that's a real broad overview of eco. I don't know if Scott, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, a couple points. Number one was, I think some of the participants mentioned that they had existing inventories of trees. Maybe that's park trees, maybe that's street trees. We do have a new feature in iTree Eco as of last year that you can import your existing inventory right into Eco and basically get instantaneous results without having to go back into the field and remeasure. It requires that you have species and DBH. Those are the two variables that it absolutely requires. If you do not have tree height, crown width, condition, crown light exposure, all these other variables that go into the model to make it more accurate, iTree Eco will use default variables for those, so you can still get results using your existing inventory with a minimal data set. However, what we always say is the more you put into iTree Eco, the more you will get out of it in terms of accuracy. So if you're collecting data, you will collect many data attributes on each tree. If you already have an existing inventory, you can still get this program and get these results. And you get a lot of results is my second point I think I want to make. There are something like 234 different graphs, charts, and tables that iTree Eco will give you on all the ecosystem services that those trees are providing, the management needs, costs, all that. It's a lot of data. It's very specific and detailed data. But iTree right now cannot make management decisions for you. It still takes a living, breathing person, someone who understands ecology, someone who understands forestry, to make sense of those data and put them into action. So as Dave mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, if you don't know why you're doing iTree, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. The question is, what do you want to get out of it? What do you want to know, and how are you going to put that information to work? That's the real power in using this kind of a tool. So you get a ton of information, but you still got to synthesize that and understand how you're going to use it.
Thanks, Scott. A couple points there, just as you were talking, Scott. We didn't clarify in case for different countries. DBH is diameter at 4.5 feet, or about 1.37 meters is the diameter of the tree. Some countries call it DAP, just in case you didn't know what DBH was. And even though there's 200 tables and charts and everything in there, when we do the standard report, you only get the highlights in that report, but you can also bring some of these other tables that might not be in the report. You can always export those and put them in too. So you can do what you want with it. We're trying to guide people. What we're working towards in the end, and this is why we're building Landscape partly, is linking eco to some of the environmental issues, at least in our country, and then we've been asked by International Society of Arboriculture and a few others to say, this is great. In essence, it gives us a lot of information, but what do we do next? So we're working on an intelligent decision that will look at some of the environmental issues in your area and then make recommendations on the species and locations to plant trees to sustain environmental services and human health and forest health within the area by looking at what risks there are to humans in terms of pollution and UV radiation, whatever it might be, and risks to trees in terms of climate change and in terms of insects and diseases. So we're trying to put all this information together, but it's still a few years away before we get there. So we will be able to help you and guide you more in the future. But right now, as Scott was saying, there's a lot of information here, but you got to do something with it. So Canopy, I can probably show you, see I'm live here. We can go right to the web page. Canopy is a photo interpretation tool. This will work globally. Oh, I'm clicking the wrong button. There we go. Nope. Got to hit that arrow. There we go. Okay. All right, it's not going live. I apologize for that. It should be going right to the website.
Yeah, Dave, we may skip that just because I think they want to wrap up in about 10 minutes and open it up for question and answer.
That's fine. Okay, then I'll zoom through it. So basically what Canopy does is it allows you to photo interpret canopy cover or impervious cover across the nation. 3 simple steps. 1, you delimit the area that you want to interpret. You go right to Google. You can either bring a shapefile in or click on with this blue icon, make a polygon or shapefile that you want for your area. Determine what classes you want to interpret. It defaults to tree and non-tree. You can add grass. You can add anything you want to interpret by just hitting the plus button, or you can delete or edit. And it's creating classes that will interpret. If the program is developed for your country, you can add localized values of pollution removal and carbon storage. And right now it's only for the United States. You can change metric units of dollars, and you can change English to metric units. And basically, once that's step 2, setting it up. Step 3, it just starts dropping points randomly within that polygon you created. It drops down crosshairs, and at the center of that crosshair, you tell it from the classes you created. In our case, it was just 2, tree or non-tree, which one it is. You click on the class, and the new point pops up to go to the next point. Very rapid way to photo interpret and statistically estimate population totals. In this case, I only put down 20 points, and you can see it keeps track of this is tree cover here and non-tree cover, and it keeps a standard error. So as you add more and more points, those blue bars become tighter and tighter, so you can become more and more certain that your estimate is accurate. We recommend at least 100 or more points. We typically do about 1,000. You can do about 1,000 points in a day, and you'll get within 1% accuracy of your cover classes. Very simple, very popular tool. You can export the points if you want to do a change analysis by going to Google Earth and slide back in time and see how the points have changed. It does percent or area estimates, and it does it in English and metric units. I think that's it for Canopy. It's a very simple tool.
Yeah, I'll just jump in, and Dave, and say it is, while it's a very simple tool, that's one of the probably most widely used tools worldwide. And the reason for that is that it really provides you with a starting point of what you have in terms of overall tree canopy. It was only, a few years ago when iTree Canopy didn't exist, and if you wanted to answer kind of that one fundamental question, how much canopy cover do I have? Just that. It used to cost tens of thousands of dollars to get that answer. You used to have to acquire some kind of remotely sensed imagery, satellite imagery, or what have you, and then it took a lot of GIS work, potentially weeks or months, to categorize or interpret where that canopy is and get you that final number, just how much canopy cover do I have. And now, with iTree Canopy, the simplicity of it, being able to do it right on the website, you can get that answer with basically no training in a single afternoon. You can have it, and they're very accurate estimates of that cover. So I think it's widely used because it's accessible. It is low cost. Again, you can do this in a couple hours or afternoon. You can be getting information that used to be very difficult to get. And if you do this, there's many people, many cities across the world that have no idea how much canopy cover they have. But if you do this in a single afternoon, you can probably be ahead of many of your peers in terms of just understanding what you got on the ground at this moment. So it's a neat tool, simple but powerful.
Thanks, Scott. Just a few more slides and we get to discussions here. This is design. If you build eco for the country, we can build design. This only works in the U.S. and Canada, but basically it allows you to sketch your house. Go into, again, back to Google. You can use this little tool up here to sketch your building and drop trees in your yards, whether they're real or if you wanted to plant a tree. It'll ask you the species, the size, the condition. And then from that data, it'll calculate, because it already has the eco data, the values and services provided by the tree the current year into the future, and it'll even backcast what the tree has given you to date for the different trees. It's a very simple tool. This tool is designed, you wouldn't want to do this for a large area. It's designed to engage school kids and homeowners in a simple matter to understand a small site. But again, it's built off of eco data.
Yeah, and you can also do, Dave, hypothetical plantings. So if you want to know where I should plant a tree around a building to give me the most benefits, iTree Design can help. If you want to know which species would provide the most benefits, iTree Design can help. So it's that old question, something you often say, Dave, is, if I can only plant one tree, where would it go? This tree can help you get that answer. Or this program, not tree, sorry.
So again, I'm going to show you design. I'm going to show you my tree too next, and then we'll end there. If you build eco, if we can get this built for your country, these two will follow, and this engages more people than just the managers, engages homeowners, and which are truthfully probably the greatest land managers in terms of area in most cities, are not the city, but mostly private citizens. So last one I'll talk about, and if you want to see any of those, we can show you it, is my tree, which is basically built off a design, which is a phone app. This works in the U.S. and Canada also right now, but we can build in other places, is basically ask you to pin where you are from your GPS on your phone or type an address in. You pick English or metric units. So you can do this anywhere within the U.S. or Canada, like I said. Just like in design, it asks you the species. You can do common name or scientific name, the condition of the tree, the diameter, whether it's exposed to full sun or within a forested stand. If it's near a building, tell us a little bit about the building and how far away from the building it is and the distance and direction. And then after that, you add your trees in. In this case, we did 4 trees. You can hit the Calculate All button or hit the Calculate button for each individual one. You can edit or delete them, and you'll get a little price tag or a nutrient label like this that shows you the values of those individual trees. So again, taking eco and moving into a very simple platform on your phone where you can be in the field and just show somebody the value of a tree in terms of energy use, pollution removed, stormwater avoided, and carbon sequestration. Real simple app. Again, we're trying to, partly why we built this is we're adding a pinning function to this, hopefully soon, where once you collect data on the tree, you can pin it to a global map to get people collecting trees across the world and know the values of those trees. The idea behind part of this pinning was we want to engage kids who are not in the woods enough or outside enough, allow them to take their phone and go out, at least to keep the electronics with them, but get them outdoors and collecting information on trees or about the environment. That's one application. Otherwise, you can just use it to educate people, but it's already on your phone. Scott, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think that's a good summary, Dave. I'll just reiterate that idea. There's a variety of tools here and a variety of sophistication to the tools themselves. And we started out with iTree Eco, and that's kind of the most robust tool. That's where you want to start if you're trying to understand, information in a lot of detail. If you already have an inventory, you can import it into Eco and get results probably in just a day. You can manage that, setting up a project and getting results. If you need to go out and do a sample plot inventory of your entire forest, that could be a months-long project in terms of planning, training inventory crews, going out and actually collecting the data, processing the data, and then developing some kind of report or synthesization of those data for whatever use you're trying to use these data for. So that's kind of one end of the spectrum. If you are not ready for iTree Eco and want to start out a little bit lighter, a little bit easier, there's a tool that can be used anywhere in the world, and that's iTree Canopy. And as we said, that can be done in a couple hours in a single afternoon. You can get to that fundamental question, how much canopy do I have? And you'll be far along the road than, again, many of your peers. And we've built these tools because we understand that not everybody is a urban forest manager and needs to understand tree information at that level. So we've developed things like iTree Design that can be used by arborists. It can be used by homeowners. Here in the U.S. at least, there are teachers teaching middle school kids about the benefits of trees through that program. And then we have tools like MyTree that, hey, if you only have a couple minutes of time, 5 minutes of time, but still want to engage somebody, or you're curious yourself about what this tree is and what it's doing for me in my backyard, in the park, wherever it may be, MyTree can do that for you in just a couple minutes, and it's accessible to anybody right there on their phone. So there's a variety of tools, a variety of sophistication. Hopefully this is an introduction of what's available to you, and what a very light introduction of how to use them. And yeah, we are open to engagement with questions and further conversations. You just please feel free to contact us.
Yeah, and there are a few other tools we're not going to go into, but there's iTree Hydro if you want to do simulations, like I said, on watersheds, on stream flow and water quality. There's iTree Species, which allows you to select, you pick what, in this case, what services you want, and it picks species for you that meet the services that you require. Landscape, if you're in the United States, we encourage you, I would even go to Landscape before I do Canopy, if you're in the United States, because there's a lot of information in this Landscape tool. So, I guess we can take questions now. I mean, we're glad to answer any questions or go more in depth on anything you want to hear about, but those are the key tools, and we'd encourage you to at least try to use Eco if you could, or Canopy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dave and Scott. So I'm going to share my screen again. And yeah, we're ready to open up the floor for questions. So if you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and ask, or you can also just type them directly into the group chat box on the side. So does anyone have any questions right now? Otherwise, we have a few ready as well. So we'll start with one that someone submitted before. So I think you already touched on this a little bit, but how easy is it to input data into iTree? So we talked about the inventory having the DBH and species data. Any other thoughts on inputting data?
Well, I can see that as two types of questions. One, if you just have inventory data through the Excel spreadsheet, it's relatively easy because it imports it in. The only thing you'd have to match up, I believe, when you do that is species to our species codes. And we have a species list because you might call it in your country a common name of something that we wouldn't even know. So we've got to match up, like Norway maples, Acer platanoides. We have to make sure that you match up to our list before you submit it, so it knows, so it has the species properly connected in the database. So inventory is pretty straightforward to import. The data collection is pretty straightforward, as is iTree Database. If you want to set up your city, the hardest thing I think in iTree Database, and there are manuals to help you through this, is probably going to getting your pollution data and submitting it. It's just pretty straight format. Is it hour one, what's the pollutant, and what's the pollutant concentration? But you have to find that locally, because some places, like if you go to China or India, we don't know where to get that data from. We've got it for all of Europe and the countries that we have, but some places you'd have to bring that in if you want to know pollution removal. Any thoughts, Scott?
Yeah, well, I'm just looking at the chat window here, and there has been a couple questions. I'm not sure everybody's seen them about importing your data if you already have an existing inventory. And just again, to reiterate what I've said and Dave said is, yes, if you have species and diameter of that tree at what we call breast height, you can import those data and get information from iTree Eco in all the supported countries. If you're not in one of those approximately 45 supported countries, you will still have to start out with the database process in terms of putting your country in there, your locations and geographic variables, as well as those pollution data that Dave just mentioned. But again, you can use that existing inventory, and it will summarize the structure of that forest based on species and DBH. It will estimate the ecosystem services and everything else you get from a normal iTree Eco project. So that is definitely an option for you if you don't have the resources to go out and collect new data in the field.
Guys, there's a question here from John. I'm not sure if I know the answer to this, but I think I do. It says, if you have an existing inventory, does iTree Eco tell you the benefits by species? We're trying to understand which species provides the most benefits. I know if you run inventories, I don't work with inventories that much, so I'm going to ask Scott. If you run an inventory through and put 1,000 trees, I know it gives you those 1,000 trees back with the services provided by the tree, but does the program automatically calculate the population totals by species? I think it does, Scott, but I've never run inventory.
Those tables are in there. You'll get prevalence of species and as well as the associated services with those species. So that can all be.
So it aggregates them. So John, you'll get the numbers per tree, and then you get the numbers aggregated by species for total number of trees and total carbon restored by the species or total pollution removed by the species. So it'll do the aggregation for you. I thought it did, but I wasn't certain.
Hi, Dave. Hi, Scott. Thanks. That was really informative. I was wondering a little bit about the species recognition aspect and trying to figure out the level of skill that's needed to determine those species. You know, do you have to be an urban forester by training to go out there and start measuring this data that you would need for eco?
That's an excellent question. The hardest thing to teach someone to do is to identify species. Everything else is pretty straightforward. It's either with a tape or something like diameter and height. That's pretty easy. Species is important if you want to get to like species diversity and you really want to know the differences, let's say, between red maple and silver maple and sugar maple. Otherwise, if they get it to genera in terms of ecosystem services, you're fine. You'll be off on the species estimates. If you call every maple a maple, you'll never be able to tell how many different maples you have. But in terms of estimating carbon or pollution removal, maple is probably good enough. The better they can do, the better off you'll be. But truthfully, when you do a city, once you get the first 10 to 15 trees done, you've got 80% of the species identified at least. So learning the most common ones. When I did the city of Oakland, we found over 350 species when I did my dissertation, and I think about 20 of them were never identified. We sent them to herbariums. We sent them to people. No one could identify them. So we call them unknowns. But do the best you can, but it's not really a deal breaker, except for if you want to do species diversity, it's going to fall apart if you don't collect species. But I think training people for the most common species will get you most of the trees you need anyways. That's my opinion. Scott, anything on that?
Yeah, well, just so you all know, when you decide you want to do an iTree Eco project, there is a very specific data collection protocol, not only in terms of the sampling protocol, if that's the way you're going versus inventory, but which measurements you take in the landscape, the tree attributes themselves, and again, that's things like diameter, breast height, crown width, crown height, all those things. There's a protocol for how that's measured. Most people would not be familiar with how to measure those variables and which tools you use to get that. So, for example, just thinking about someone who might be interested but not trained as a forester, how do you measure tree height? Well, there's specific tools that allow you to do that. So that's all part of it. So training those crews, having someone knowledgeable to train those crews, I think anybody can be trained, but it takes someone knowledgeable to do the training and provide that consistency amongst all the crews. That being said, here in the States, it is done all different ways. There are consultants that will do the work for you that are very familiar with iTree and tree measurement techniques. There are other cities who use a big iTree project to really engage the community, and rather than hiring a consultant, they want to use volunteers as a means of engagement. And so they put together a training program, they recruit volunteers, and then have the volunteers actually go out and collect the data. So it's been done all different ways, if that helps.
Wonderful. We have time for another question. Anybody else have anything that they're wondering?
Yes, Edie,
And
this is John Rob.
hi.
Can I jump in?
Hello.
Can you hear me? Hi.
Please do.
Thanks very much. Scott and Dave, thanks very much. This was really interesting. With regard to the iTree Canopy tool, you mentioned that you recommend people take about 1,000 plots. I assume that that will change based on the area that you're sampling. Do you have a minimum recommendation or a built-in suggestion about how much area those plots should cover when sampling? And is my assumption correct that once you do an initial sampling of, say, those 1,000 plots in area X, there is some sort of model behind iTree that will interpret the rest of the images to give you a total tree cover canopy for across the entire area?
The answer to the second question is no. It is not because it's just a Google image. It doesn't know. There's no photogrammetric information behind it on the the color depths of anything. All we have is what the visual person can see. So what you're doing, they're not plots, but they're points. They're infinitely small points. It's like dropping a penny out of an airplane. What did the penny hit on the way down is what you're interpreting. So in terms of sample size, you will be, with 1,000 points randomly selected, you will be within 1% of the total, most likely. And I'm almost certain you will be within 1, or very close to 1% of the total. So the question of area becomes different. So if I sample an area that is 10 acres or 10 hectares, and I sample an area that's 1,000,000 hectares, I still would put 1,000 points down, and I'd still be within 1%. But the 1% of 10 is much smaller than the 1% of 1,000,000. So the question is, what type of precision do you want? Do you want to be within 1% accurate of the total, or do you want to be within 1, let's say, hectare? And that's where it would be, it's a different question whether you want to get to absolute amounts or relative percents. So if you're going with percents, 1,000 is fine. But if you want to be within a certain area, you'd have to calculate that out. Because it would depend on how big, the program would actually tell you how big the area you digitized is. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, you do have to put a boundary in there, that area, and it can be, quite honestly, it could be a single family residence parcel, it could be a park, it could be an entire city, or people have even done it for entire states here in the U.S.
We've done the world, actually.
So yeah, it can be done at any level, and it's, as Dave said, it's up to you. It will there's a statistical algorithm inside that application that calculates the estimates, and it will give you a standard error associated with it. So if you are just trying to get a basic number and you're saying, hey, I don't need 1% accuracy, plus or minus 10% would be okay for me for what I'm trying to do, then you might only need 100 points to be interpreted. If you're trying to get down to that 1% accuracy that Dave mentioned, then you're going to be doing 500 or 1,000 points. But the program will tell you what the accuracy as for every point you drop and interpret, it makes that updated estimate and standard error calculation for you, so you can kind of see where you are as you go.
So what it is not doing, though, it is not creating a map for you. And that's what I think you were asking for. If you took the points, could you train it to do the rest of the map? It's not doing that. It's basically statistically estimating the total or percent of your area occupied by that cover class, whether it be tree or impervious or whatever it might be. And that's what you're getting at. We will be adding a feature coming up that will add, when you drop those points down, it'll color code those points to the class so you can make trees green and impervious black or whatever, and you'll see the points on the map. But so in essence, if you keep adding points, you'll be creating the map yourself, but it is not a system that uses in GIS that looks at the colors behind it and does training of the image itself. That's a totally different program.
Hey, Dave, on the Canopy and eco side of things, here's one more question for you that came in by chat, and they're asking about how does the eco results in a city compare to a remotely sensed canopy study, something like urban tree canopy study work, and have we analyzed those results or done that comparison?
Okay, so you have urban tree canopy studies that will create a map of tree cover. iTree, if you use iTree Canopy, Canopy will be as accurate or even more accurate than those cover maps, depending on how many points you put down. It will not create the map, but it will give you statistically a better estimate if you put enough points down than the cover map will, because there's inaccuracies in the cover map. If you go to Eco, which is a field plot based method, the map will be better for canopy cover because it creates a wall-to-wall cover. We're only collecting cover on, let's say, 200 plots in the field, so the map will give you a canopy and the map will give you better estimates of cover. What Eco will give you is estimates of the species composition, the health, the diameter distribution, and the ecosystem services is what the UTC maps are not giving you. They're just giving you a cover map. Those maps are good, but they're only giving you cover maps. Eco will tell you a lot more that you can see when you go into the field that you cannot get from those cover maps.
Great, that's so helpful. And thank you both again, Dave and Scott. It's been such a pleasure having you here, and we really appreciate you sharing your expertise. So thank you again for coming. And it looks like, thank you. Looks like we're just about at time, so I just wanted to let everyone know we will be having our next Cities for Forests webinar on August 15th at 12 p.m. EDT or 6 p.m. CEST, so there will be an invite going out for that again. And that's on financing green and gray infrastructure with Todd Gartner, the Director of Cities for Forests and the Natural Infrastructure Initiatives at WRI. And he's going to be talking about case studies and financing options like green bonds, pay for success, insurance for risk reduction, and so on. But we also want to hear from you about what you're interested in for future webinar topics with the Interforest Working Group, so please don't hesitate to share those with us. And we will also be sending out a brief survey after this webinar, so we'd love to get your feedback and hear more about what you're looking for and what you'd like to hear about. So thank you again, everyone, for attending, and thank you so much to Dave Nowak and Scott Maco.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you so much.